is relatively unique to the game of football. The huddle is relatively unique to the game of football. And football, as a legendary player and coach Bill Curry has said, is the only game where every player needs every teammate on every play just in order to survive. The huddle is a safe and sacred sanctuary in the midst of a chaotic and sometimes hostile world where we can all come together, look each other in the eye, and get on the same page. It is a place of quiet and solitude in the midst of a roaring crowd where you can listen and communicate with each other, trust each other, and respect each other. When we break the huddle, we come together as one heartbeat, committed to attacking a common adversary and formidable foe. If we falter, we huddle up again. And if we succeed, we celebrate together. Huddle Up America is a proven program that allows diverse members of the community to respect each other, listen and talk through their challenges and concerns together. It provides a safe and trusted forum to restore hope and constructive dialogue that can lead to real, meaningful, and lasting progress. The Pro Football Hall of Fame has used its powerful public platform to gather police chiefs, community leaders, social activists, and young African Americans to open communication on each group's fears and concerns. The Hall has conducted 30 national town halls with Hall of Famers interacting directly with young adults with its Strong Youth, Strong Communities program in partnership with the Centene Corporation. Rather than divide, we choose to unite, to listen, hear, and understand so we can respect diverse opinions to inspire much needed hope during this tumultuous, unsettling, and violent time in America. With faith that when we break our huddle, we will all have learned something we didn't know or think of that will open the hearts and minds of our viewers on the road to recovery that we all want for ourselves, our children, our community, and our country.
This is a presentation of the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Welcome to this special edition of Huddle Up America, Listen and Learn. I'm your host, Jameer Howerton, and over the next 90 minutes, you will hear from our distinguished panel, including Executive Vice President of Football Operations for the NFL, Troy Vincent, Hall of Famers, Aeneas Williams and Champ Bailey, 4 amazing high school students. From South Carolina, Sheriff Leon Lott, renowned educator, Dr. Art McCoy, and head of security for the NFL and former Washington, D.C. Police Chief, Kathy Lanier, and President of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, David Baker. Hello, everyone. I would like to thank you for joining us today as we huddle up America and listen and learn. We appreciate your time and trust in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We're all ready to listen and learn. The murder of George Floyd has sparked massive protest and then a rage in our country that we haven't seen since 1968 during the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and riots in over 100 cities in America. This is the time and this is the place for open dialogue. Each panelist will have 3 questions and we'll give you 3 to 4 minutes to answer each question. And then after you hear each other's response, we'll give you 1 minute to come back and give us your final thought. As Winston Churchill said, courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. With that being said, I'm ready to listen, and I hope you guys are too. And I'd like to come first to Mr. Troy Vincent of the National Football League. First and foremost, Mr. Vincent, I hope you're doing well and your family is safe and sound. I want to ask you, how has this both occurrences impacted you, George Floyd's murder and the aftermath, in a personal way?
Well, I'll start not just with George Floyd was the latest that we saw on camera, but if we just go back 30 days with Ahmaud Arbery and then the murder of Breonna Taylor, the pandemic put the globe, the nation, in a global timeout. And then we saw the murders of these lives, these 3 lives, that caused each of us the unrest, the streets to riot and protest. But that is normal of what we have been seeing for those that are Black Americans for decades. America happened to witness it due to the time and the elements of everyone being at home. We saw the ugliness of the nation. Personal experience, I talked to my sons and my daughters about, okay, what are we going to do? What are some of the solutions? We, as Black parents, we raise our kids to survive, in particular, those who have Black boys, to survive going from the grocery store to the mall to college, to back to college campus and home. That's not normal. So it's affected my family because now my children are married with children. Do these murders, do these killings, does this mindset continue for generations to come? What are my granddaughters? What should they expect moving forward? There's been a challenge flag thrown on the field by the young people across the country, Black, white, male, female, young, a challenge flag to us as leaders to end the racism, to end these injustices that we've seen, and to take a stand.
From a professional standpoint, how has these unsettling events impacted you when you look at you and your career of being a part of the National Football League?
So it's allowed me, frankly, to have a discussion with my colleagues that's not a normal discussion. Typically, it's around revenues, it's around the activation of a game. Inside of this timeout, and it's been an extended timeout, it's allowed myself professionally to engage with my peers, the peers to hear a side of many of us, not just myself, but others, why we conduct ourselves in the workplace, where when you go to work and when you leave work, my ride on a subway station on subway car number on 6, going back uptown in Manhattan is a much different ride when I go into the subway system than my counterparts. So I think, I do believe it's created the dialogue that is necessary for change.
What needs to happen going forward for actual constructive and meaningful change, Troy?
Well, one, it takes our peers, our white peers, to adopt and commit to ending racism, seeing these injustices come to an end. We have to now begin putting a plan together of working together, seeing all parties come together for the common good of a better nation. So the hopes is that as the fire burns out, that we truly can put a plan in place that we can execute using sport analogy. Let's put a plan together on controlling what we can control, because this is just an example of the ugliness that one exists inside of our buildings in New York, LA, and New Jersey, that is manifested externally. So from our hiring practices, how is the athlete or we as people of color portrayed through our sport, but using our sport for social change, for the common good of our country?
Troy, I want to thank you so much for your time and thoughts. And everyone, I would like to welcome Sheriff Leon Lott to the conversation. Mr. Lott, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I would like to come to Dr. McCoy next. Dr. McCoy, when you look at these events from a personal view, and I know you work with the kids each and every day, and you are all about saving the babies, how has this affected you?
First, thank you for the forum. It's a pleasure to be with each and every one of you. I have so much to share. Let me say, first, it's horrible to see the reality that occurs, but there are so many things that people don't know. And I want to show books as I say things, because there's nothing new under the sun. And the fact is that there are so many lies that our teachers have told us. And I'm a teacher, and this is a book called The Lies My Teacher Told Me, but it ultimately tells you that history and reality in the world is a sick and terribly difficult place with death, murders, and killings every day. Every 2 hours, more than one black male expires from an act of violence. This time it was caught on TV. One of the saddest things beyond the knee on the neck of George Floyd was that nobody had the courage to physically push, shove, distract in a way to trip that officer to give him 1 second to breathe, which may have gave him 8 more minutes. There got to be disruptors in the world, because when we lose courage to be disruptors, when we see what's wrong, that's even scarier than 1 or 2 people in power that's going to put power on top of you. It's no one challenging that power. So now I'm encouraged to see young people saying, I don't want to be the monsters that you are. Mom, dad, or grandma, granddad, or system of oppression. You're the monster. This is a monster. That's not me. We won't take it anymore. And I'm talking millennials. I'm talking Gen Z, 16, 15, 14. It's over from that group. They're not going to take it. We got to take that zeal and add some knowledge so that we can create a new covenant in America. The social contract was broken, and that's the deal. The social contract is broken anytime people of power exert their power against you in a way that suffocates you. I Can't Breathe isn't just about an officer having a neck on someone's throat. It's also about mental health. The fact that black males are now at the top of the list for suicide, that shares that the system is suffocating us to the point where you feel like it's better to take your life because you can't breathe in this life. So some of us are dying to live, but we're living to die. And that's not just true for black men, that's true for black women, that's true for even white women. This is not a black versus white issue. This is a everybody against racism issue. And so this is what I see, an opportunity to make an impact. A lot more friends have been invited to this struggle because I've been fighting a war against ignorance for a long time. And now there's a lot more friends at this struggle ready to fight this war against ignorance and apathy. What is ignorance and what is apathy? Well, it's when you say, I don't know and I don't care. Well, now we know and now we care, and it's time to get to work.
With that being said, from a professional standpoint, what are some of the things that you've been actively doing?
So I'll tell you this. I've been educating tons of people. I've been out on at least 12 marches, and I've been able to show them exactly what happens when you march. That's simply getting the attention of the system. Now, once you got their attention, you get invited to a table of power that says, how can we redistribute power? And you have to teach that racism is real. But the bottom line is it's a heart condition. You can't force anybody to love you. But what you can do is force some power to be given to you so they don't have to love you so you can live. They don't have to love you so you can eat. They don't have to love you so you can have a cop interact with you and live and walk and live and see another day. That's about power. So we have been redistributing power. From COVID, redistributing Chromebooks, giving 2,000 away, raising money. We raised $500,000, giving away 100,000 pounds of food every Friday, getting our census papers on because we count and we must count, telling people that you need to take your amen to the ballot box. It's all right to say amen, hallelujah, but you need to take your amen to the ballot box and go vote, because ultimately it's time to turn some tables. For those Jesus-loving people, Jesus went to the temple and turned over tables when he saw some corrupt crap in the temple, because it was written in his word that that shouldn't happen and this should be a house of prayer. Well, we're ready to turn some tables. That's what we're doing professionally.
In your community, have you started to see some of the change?
Heck yes. We have a black mayor for the first time in the city of Ferguson. First time in the history of Ferguson for 225 years, 26 years of existence, a black female mayor, first black, first female. That was historic. We have young people being put into committees. We have a new police chief, and the police chief is saying, all right, we're going to redistribute and do community policing, and we want the youth to lead this way. They are at the table because that's where power lies, sitting at the table of power and taking what's rightfully yours.
Dr. McCoy, thank you for your time.
Thank
Kathy
you.
Lanier, I'd like to come to you and pose the same three questions. First and foremost, how has this impacted how has these occurrences both impacted you on a personal level?
Well, personally, you know, I was a police officer for almost 30 years, and the last 10 of those years I was the chief of police, where I actually had the ability to make some change. But I've seen a lot of homicides in my time as a police officer, but never have I watched a homicide occur with a person wearing a police uniform that was so, I mean, all homicides are brutal and heartbreaking, but this was vicious and callous, and just the thought that crossed my mind instantly was for his family. You know, knowing I've dealt with victims' families for so many years and how impactful the loss of a loved one is, but a loss of a loved one in this manner is so horrific for a family to deal with. And then at the same time, heartbreaking for me also, because I know exactly how the good cops are feeling when they see this video, you know. And believe me, I'm a firm believer that you need those good cops to help with this reform. And I see good cops walking away from the job right now, and those are the ones we need to help turn this around. Heartbreaking, shocking, offensive. And for the first time, and I've seen now video after video after video come out with you know, images like what we just saw with George Floyd. And I can no longer, as a police officer, say, well, it's just one bad, right? You know, there's one bad person here. There's bad apples in every bunch in every profession. I can't make myself do that anymore. You know, even though I have been in policing my whole life. I think the important thing, and then you was asking both events. The other thing that really struck me about this that was just so horrific to me, besides the fact of the act itself, the officers who stood and watched. And it was point made earlier. How could nobody just come and just push him on? Had one of those other officers just intervened, they'd be a hero. They'd be a hero. To me, the second worst part of that video was 3 cops standing there doing nothing. Just unbelievable. You have one bad apple here and there. You don't have 4 that stand and do nothing. The other part was watching the protests. I've been managing protests in Washington, D.C. my whole life. And when I saw federal police officers in military flak jackets and tear gas being shot outside the White House, I came on in 1990. We had a riot my first week on the job in Mount Pleasant. We've not shot tear gas in Washington, D.C. since then. That was 1990. And when the federal police dispersed tear gas against peaceful protesters in front of the White House, I was shocked to see that in the nation's capital. So personally, both of those things have a huge impact on the way I view the world.
And with you being head of the security for the National Football League, your professional career now, how will you see this impact as the NFL is gearing up for this season?
Well, initially, I'll tell you, the ability to support my colleagues at the National Football League, we're all very close, and a lot of people coming to us, myself and my colleagues in the security department at the NFL, asking for our help to know how to navigate going out and protesting and having a voice. Everybody feels like they want to do something. And initially after this, I felt like powerless, because now I'm not the chief anymore. I can't just go and order reforms in my police department. I can't speak as a national voice, you know, and push these police reforms, because I'm a civilian now. I'm in the NFL. But then I realized that I have a lot of my colleagues that are looking for guidance on how to go out and raise their voice, and what are the things they need to be pushing for in terms of reform. And so now I have a mission at the league, you know, with my colleagues to help them organize. And I tell you where you need to go and make reforms. I've seen behind the curtain in the police department. Look, when I came on, women weren't accepted to the police department either. My first 10 years was hell in the police department. So I know where to look and what things to push reform. So that's my goal, is to help my colleagues push some of those reforms.
And with that being said, do you think that will make that meaningful change and that constructive change, ma'am?
I think it will, but it's going to take a long time, and it's going to take everybody. And I think it's going to take those good cops. We can't lose them. We need the good cops to fight the fight from the inside.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lanier. Jalen, I'd like to come to you. I want to pose these 3 questions to you, Jalen. Jalen, you will be a senior this year,
yes,
high
sir.
school in Georgia. And when you witnessed this, Jalen, these two occurrences, the George Floyd murder and then the aftermath, how did that affect you personally, sir?
Well, watching the video, like watching all occur and like unfold, it kind of like it rubbed me in like a very, 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 very low way. And like when I discussed it with my friends, like the time it happened, it scared us a lot. It made us a lot nervous. Like it threw us the wrong kind of ball. So for like a while, it was a bad taste in everyone's mouth, honestly.
And as you gear up, we know you're not in school now, but as you gear up to go back to school, how do you think that's going to, as a student, how do you think this is going to affect you and change you?
I think it'll affect me a lot because I go to like a mixed school, so it's mixed race. So I feel like you'll have times here and there where you'll have like disagreements between races between other students, but the people I surround myself around, like they're all for Black Lives Matter. So I mean, I feel like it'll work in a good way, in a good manner. They'll all come together for a cause.
And have you really take the time to think about what it could do to make meaningful change within your community? What will it take?
For sure. And
what will it take, if you don't mind me asking you?
I feel like it would take for like numerous amount of people, not just the Black race, but like numerous races to come together and like stand for one. Like, because to be honest, it's not just for Black lives, it's for all lives, to be honest. But I feel like it's going to take more than one voice to be heard for the change.
Jalen, thank you for sharing.
No problem.
Pro Football Hall of Famer, Mr. Champ Bailey, I'd like to come to you, sir. Thank you very much for your time and joining us today for this conversation.
Yes, sir.
Your speech that you delivered during enshrinement has touched us all. And with that being said, and you looking at these events that have occurred in our country, how have they affected you on a personal level?
Tremendously, and, when you refer back to my speech, I think about, something Troy said about now I'm having these dialogues with my colleagues, which is important, right? But I think what I have is more questions than answers, right? Because, I'm thinking about what Kathy said about the cop jumping in and, being the hero. If he saves that guy's life, he can't go back to the precinct. So, that thought sounds great, but for him, that unity under the spell of whatever the hell they're thinking when they shoot at unarmed Black men, I mean, I can't come to grips with what they're thinking and how they view us. So I'm like, okay, well, why are we here? Why are we in this position? Why are we so vulnerable? And every time I go back to the 70s, I go back to the early 1900s, I go back to the end of slavery, I go back to when we first got here. And it's like, we came over here for one reason, economics. So that's really where it has to start with solving this problem. Throwing money behind these organizations that are on the ground, trying to make a difference, trying to change things. And it's not just money, it's resources. It's all kinds of things that I keep coming up with. Like, I can't get away from the fact that, so what if you clean up the police departments around the country? So what? Ahmaud Arbery wasn't shot by a cop. He was shot by somebody who thought that he had the authority to kill a black man because he looked like a criminal. So this racism is deep. And if we can't get people to just admit that there's systemic racism, how are we going to start looking for solutions? I've heard several politicians this week say, I don't believe in systemic racism, even black ones. You know, and it's funny, like if we can't get our leaders to help us lead or help us come up with solutions, we're going to have problems. So it goes back to, yes, that prayer is good, but get to the ballot box. We got to vote. We got to get people in power that are going to initiate change, because we're just going to keep spinning our wheels, putting Band-Aids on thing after thing. That's just going to be temporary solutions. We really need to throw money at organizations and resources in these communities that are underserved, period. Because if we don't get a fair shake from the get-go, I honestly have reconciled with the fact that nothing's going to change for me. Like the rest of my life, I'm going to have to deal with this. But for my kids, I got 4 boys. And my grandkids, I swear, I got to make it better for them. So I'm going to do my part, but at the same time, I need everybody else. And it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a whole lot, but I don't see it changing in the next 20 years. This is 400 years of evidence of oppression. It's not going to change overnight, but we got to keep making these steps, and it's going to take everybody.
Champ, from a professional level and the things that you're doing in the community, how has that impacted you?
A lot. You know, I think the best thing I could do is really use my voice and try to bring awareness, because again, I can't create solutions on my own. So one thing I want to do is make sure the people around me, all my white friends, all the people that watch me play ball, my fans, whatever, get them to understand my pain so they can empathize with me. And then maybe they empathize with somebody else they know that looks like me. So, you know, I'm trying to spread it that way. But at the same time, I've worked with this nonprofit called Gideon's Promise, and they train public defenders. Why public defenders? Because who needs them the most? Poor people who look like me and who typically get put in the system and can't get out of it. I mean, I don't know if anybody's heard Rayshard Brooks, his statement about trying to get out of the system. It's real. Meek Mill went through the same thing. We get in that system, man. That's systemic racism. These are facts. I mean, this is not something that can be disputed, but yet again, we have a hard time with people admitting it exists. So I try to do my part, but it's more about just bringing awareness, because if these people that run these corporations don't get behind this stuff, it's never going to get anywhere.
Champ, thank you for sharing that. I want to go back to Mr. Vincent, because I know you have to leave soon, but after you've heard from Dr. McCoy, Champ Bailey, Kathy Lanier, your colleague, what are can you give us some of your final thoughts, and just from hearing your colleagues?
I just want to thank all of the panelists for just sharing. And my final thoughts is, one, each of us accepting that this is our issue. This is not one race's issue, a gender issue. This is our issue. Each of us having the courage, I think Kathy had alluded to that, and others, the courage to take a stand and not being afraid. Our silence implies that we're okay with what we see. And then it takes, lastly, it takes the proper education, the proper legislation, the proper policies, and then endless love. All of those things have to work together for us to have a better America.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you very much. I want to go to Sheriff Lott. Sheriff, you've been hearing the conversation. I want to ask you the 3 questions, but I want to start off with the impact that it's had on you from a personal standpoint when you watched the George Floyd murder and then the aftermath.
Well, as Kathy described, and I think any police officer that's a good police officer will tell you, it hurt us. It's terrible that we have someone that's wearing a uniform like we do to engage in something like that. It's just, it was awful. It made us sick to our stomach, and it hurts us as professionals that, you know, something like that would occur. On a personal level, I have a 16-year-old daughter. She's an athlete. She plays AAU basketball. She's the minority when she's playing basketball. Having her come to me and say, "Daddy, why did that happen? Why did a police officer do something like that?" And explain that to my daughter, that that's not what we believe in, but it does exist. And I'll go back to what some of the panelists have said. Racism does exist. It exists in law enforcement, but it exists all over. But we have to work together as a team to get rid of it. And what I've seen on this movement that encourages me is it's just not African Americans. I think in the past, African Americans were the only ones that said racism exists. After George Floyd's murder, what we see now is all races are saying there's a problem. There's a problem with racism, and we need to do something about it. So that's what I'm encouraged the most about, is now seeing that everybody now is admitting there's an issue, and what can we do to fix it?
With that being said, sir, what will it take? You being a part of law enforcement, what will it take to make meaningful change, Mr. Lott?
That the good cops' voices are going to be heard. One, that we're going to listen to our community, work with our community. But, as Kathy said, the chief said, that why didn't those other cops stand up and do something? Why didn't they intervene? That, to me, that's where we have to let our people know that where this uniform is, that when you see something like that, don't be silent. Don't stand there and watch it happen. Do something about it. That is our duty, to do something about that. One of those 3 cops could have come over there and said, "Stop it." They could have taken his knee off his neck. They should have done something. To me, they're just as guilty. The fact that they stood there and allowed it to happen, they're just as guilty. But the good cops have got to stand up and say, enough is enough. We're not going to tolerate that in our profession anymore, and we have to stop it amongst ourselves.
Sheriff Lott, thank you for your time as well. Mariah, I want to come to you next. Hi, Mariah. Mariah is 16, and she will be a junior in high school this year. And Mariah, as you sit back and you listen to all the other panelists, how has this affected you on a personal level?
Well, anyways, don't mind me. I'm getting a little emotional, but personally, it scares me because, like, that could have been my dad, that could have been my brother, that could have been my uncle, anybody. And it's like the fact that you just see this all the time. Like, this is not the first Black person to get killed unarmed. Sorry, this is not the first. This is, and it's not going to be the last. I know for a fact it's not going to be the last. But it's like there's always going to be a thought in my head, like, who's next? Am I next? Like no one does anything, and it's just, that bothers me so much. Besides just like speaking and things, like policemen, like they do some things, like at protests, they might stand with somebody, take a picture with somebody, but that's not proving anything. That's not doing anything. That's just taking a picture.
And as a student, and as you get ready for school for next year, how do you think going into school, how this is going to impact you as well?
Well, recently, in school, I go to Chamblee. And so recently there's been like an outbreak. Someone made this Instagram account and they were just posting a lot of videos of white people in our school saying the N-word. And it was a bunch. And honestly, some of them were my friends. And I remember seeing maybe one of the videos, but not all of them, dating back to like, I don't know, it was a couple years ago. But it was just sad for me to see that because, like, for one, a lot of them I open up to you. Like, you know me. Everyone knows me. If you mess with me, I mean, you just know me. So it's like, it's crazy to see all that. And then it opened up my eyes to a lot of other things. Like, they were talking about sexual harassment, racial slurs, all that going on in my school. And it kind of embarrassed me to think that I go to a school like that. Because, like, most of the time you don't see that at my school. Like, everyone just seems happy. It's very diverse, like very diverse. So you don't think you would see something like that. And it kind of just upsets me.
With your school being diverse, what do you think that can help the process? Do you think having town hall meetings of what we're having now could affect some change?
I felt like it could, honestly, because after that happened, I know a couple friends that, like, a couple of my white friends that, like, know me well, they came to me and they apologized. They were like, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say this," or "I was drunk," or "I was this." That doesn't mean anything. Drunk, nothing. That, you have no right to say that, regardless on if you're intoxicated, because you can control yourself just a little, as much as you can. So you had no way in saying that. But I feel like what we're doing right now, that's a great way to like open up all the students, let them see like what's actually happening, because it's like they're just ignoring it. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Mariah. I appreciate
You're
you.
welcome.
Mayim, I would like to come to you next. Mayan is a 17-year-old senior. Actually, you just graduated, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So you've been hearing everybody talk. You've been listening to your fellow students as well talking, and the adults as well. But if you could just talk about the impact that this has had on you from a personal level.
From a personal standpoint, unfortunately, when I first heard about the murder of George Floyd, it didn't come as a surprise. As stated earlier in the panel, we had been seeing on the news the case of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and all the years prior, you know, to Tamir Rice and Trayvon Martin, this definitely did not come as a surprise. And however, after watching the video, I got a true understanding of the hatred and the systematic racism at play. And I knew if I saw that, then people around me were seeing that as well. And definitely, once I started my new job, my coworkers were talking about it, and to see them talking, and they're all white women, to see them talking about an issue that personally affects me and my family, it really just, it gave me hope that there are people wanting change. Seeing all the protests, not only in our country, but around the world, people are begging and desperate for change and for justice. And so this has caused me to have a little hope as I am stepping onto a college campus this fall. My family and I, we've been talking, you know, how is being a Black woman going to affect your time on campus? It is. My mom told me point blank, you know, this is going to affect you your whole life. So seeing that people are now noticing this and are wanting to help us change this brings me so much hope.
And what do you think, as you step on that college campus this coming fall, what could be some of the things that can help the process and make that change?
I think what could help make that change is continuing to have these discussions, continuing to talk to people who are close to me, new people, my new roommates, just helping them understand my struggles and things like that. And also creating groups, creating forums that'll help us talk about how to make change in our college campus, as well as the community around us, how to support young students of color in the elementary and middle and high schools, and how to support students of color on campus, and how to continue to bring about change.
Mayan, thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Thank you. Pastor Aeneas Williams, Pro Football Hall of Famer, we'd like to come to you. You've been on the front lines. You've been on the front lines. From a personal view, and you see this again, what are your thoughts?
Well, one, just as Troy said, thank you to all the panelists. In seeing the tragedy happen, now we have the passion, we have the protest, and as Champ mentioned, we have money being earmarked. And as also the sheriff and the head of security with the National Football League has already said, there are obviously far more good law enforcement than the bad ones. So I remember being home with my children back at home in New Orleans at my parents' house. And I remember joking with my dad, and I saw how he was treating my children, his grandchildren. And I joked with my dad, I said, Pops, you're getting soft. And then my dad said, no, son, as you get older, you just realize there's a better way. So one of the things that we can do, because it starts right now, if we just go initially, what's the initial issue we're dealing with right now that sparked the outrage? It's law enforcement and community, and particularly certain communities. So what we want to do is kind of like the guys know in football, we go through walkthroughs, we go through a certain amount of training, and we go through a lot of things. And even though these guys have a lot of testosterone going in the middle of a game, it is very defined during the course of an NFL game. If you throw a punch, you are kicked out the game. So you will notice, even though guys may get in scuffles, somebody may do something wrong to them, usually the guys don't retaliate because to be eliminated from allowing to play is very clear. That's why so many guys don't get kicked out the game, even though some negative things may happen to them. So what I'm excited about, we've already champed. I want to speak even more hope to our generation. If God is allowing this thing to bubble up the way it has in our generation, that means he knows he's placed within us in this generation the ability to make a difference. Now, what I would like to point out to is some of our fellow Americans that are part of the lesbian and gay community. If we realize, because they've organized very well, because they have been very involved in the political process, not just getting people elected, as getting people of color elected. It's literally requiring that in order for any group of people to get a vote, there has to be some things on paper that are required to be a part of the plan that will be executed if they are elected. So that's where we participate. Number one, to understand this democratic system and how it worked. It works through flawed people, but it also works through people who take their anger, as Dr. King said. The riots are the voices of people that are not heard. I would say the riots also are for people who have their anger misguided. I want to take that same anger and same passion and use it to come up with things that we can agree with at the table with law enforcement and community leaders, and then put together groups in the community and law enforcement, some kind of oversight that we can now see these things executed.
And Aeneas, if you could just talk about some of the ongoing progress that you have and your church has been doing, just in the aftermath of the Michael Brown trials and the work that you guys are continuing to do.
Well, I just want to point out one thing. With a lot of the protests, my family and I, we've been a part of the protest. But initially, when I first saw the video, I can't describe what I was feeling. It was almost like I was numb. I wasn't ready to do any interviews nationally or locally. I really wanted to find out what I needed to process how I was feeling. Then the second thing, I needed to go out, and I did in Ferguson a couple of weeks ago. About midnight, and between midnight and 2 o'clock in the morning, because I wanted to go in, no cameras, nothing, and begin to find out who are the influencers that are expressing that Black Lives Matter among the young people. I wanted to find out who were the influencers and what did they want to happen after the lights are gone, after the passion is gone, after the protests are over. And I had a chance to meet with a young man by the name of Sean. I was immediately able to connect Sean up with the chief of police in Ferguson, Chief Jason, and allowed them to have a conversation. Because the first thing I wanted to do, because even as African Americans, all of us have had different experiences with law enforcement. Not all of us have had negative, fatal encounters with law enforcement. So I wanted to hear what it was like from different perspectives. And that's what we were able to do, to get us together in a room and allow Sean to share his experiences at 10 years old, being mishandled by law enforcement, a person of a Caucasian persuasion, Caucasian police officer that changed his life at 10 years old as to how he saw cops. And then Chief Jason, who's also African American, he was able to share with Sean his experiences being in that position and being in law enforcement. So the first thing I wanted to do was listen and then be able to connect people to have this dialogue.
With that being said, of being that bridge builder, what else do you think is going to take to invoke change, meaningful, constructive change?
When one, there could be no reconciliation. As a Christ follower, Jesus was a reconciler, meaning walk down the center of the street and do your best to bring parties of opposite side together. So at the table, the first thing, in order for reconciliation to take place with God or even in a human, I have to admit the things that are wrong. If you read the book of Daniel, you find out that Daniel asked for forgiveness for his forefathers because his current situation of being exiled was as a result of the consequences of decisions that were made long before Daniel got there. So even as we're at the table, the first thing people may say, well, I didn't do that. Well, I can apologize on behalf of my forefathers if I'm now in position of authority, even though I didn't do it and I have a total different mindset. I can acknowledge that some of my ancestors in the past did do it wrong. Some of my law enforcement brothers, some of my community leaders were wrong. Now, once we acknowledge that, now we've set the stage for an atmosphere to work collectively together to come up with a plan of equality that would help keep the officers safe and also be able to save and serve the community.
Pastor Williams, thank you very much, sir. McCoy, I'm going to come to you last before we open it up for final thoughts. But McCoy, what has been your thoughts on, and how did this impact you on a personal level?
It really, it makes me think, how can someone just based off of color judge you and in some cases kill you just because of how you look? It really bothers me because I like to think I'm a really cool person, but someone may just look at me, see my skin, and say, you know what? Nah, he's got to be doing something. Selling drugs, maybe he's doing something that's not productive. And I'm going to college. I'm trying to contribute to the economy just like everybody else. But no, you look at me and you just see somebody else, and that really rubs me the wrong way.
What do you think it's going to take to make meaningful change, McCoy?
I think we need more people of color in high-ranking positions and more black cops because, in all honesty, black people, when they see cops, they're automatically weary. But if it were someone that looked like them, they might be less weary than they normally are. And if it was a black cop, especially if it's in a community of poverty and they make it out of that community and they come back and they work in that community as a cop, they can connect with people from there. Instead of, the white person coming in and, maybe catching the black person off guard, it'll be the black cop coming in and saying, you know what, we just going to chill and let's talk about this because I just saw your aunt at the Family Dollar 2 days ago. There's no need for us to be anything to happen besides, unless you did something wrong, there's no need for anything to happen besides a conversation.
And McCoy, as you get ready to further your education, how do you think all of these events and what's still going on is going to affect you and what needs to happen?
I'm going to an HBCU, and there's going to be a lot of people that look like me. And I feel like that's just going to make our bond stronger because, there are so many people that are going to Savannah State just like me that I talk to on a daily basis about this and about other things to try to just build a relationship so that we can all just be cool when we arrive on campus.
Thank you, McCoy. Thank you very much. Okay, I want to open it up for, I want to come to Kathy Lanier first. Kathy, just want to get your final thoughts after you got a chance to hear from everybody. What are your final thoughts for our audience?
Thank you so much for including me in this. This has been very, very helpful for me. Two thoughts, one from my head, one from my heart. From my heart, I think there's a lot of people that would love to see us divided in a lot of ways, divided by race, divided by, political opinions, whatever. And we can't let that happen because then we all lose. Reform's not going to come if we divide. We have to be united. And I see a good start for that united approach when I look at the you know, the makeup of these protests and the people that are speaking out. So we have a good start, but don't let anything divide us, because then we lose. From my head, I will tell you, this is far beyond a police officer and racism and in the police department and racism in general. You really need to target those that are corrupting the system, or the system that is corrupt. And that is everything from, and my number one, police unions. Police unions are incredibly powerful. As a police chief, I fired more than 24 officers that I was ordered to rehire because the unions took to arbitration, and over small administrative technicalities or timelines or whatever, got those officers rehired back on the police department. So as a police chief, I was powerless to stop these police officers from coming back. These police unions are creating political action committees. They're funneling money into states' attorneys' offices and DAs. So there's a connection there in that system. And police unions have become far too powerful, and they don't allow good police chiefs to get rid of bad police officers. And so that's a part of the system that has to be addressed in this reform effort. And the system, remember, this is a criminal justice system. So look at all the things in the system that have allowed excessive uses of force to not be addressed properly. Why is it that an officer that has 17, 18, 19 complaints is still on the job? Police unions. Why is it that when officers are involved in fatal uses of force, it takes 2 years for a secret grand jury that nobody can see? There's no transparency here. Where's the transparency? So transparency and accountability for the whole criminal justice system, because that's what keeps this cycle from being broken. So please, everybody, stay together. If I can help in any way, I'm happy to help. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Lanier. Dr. McCoy, I'd like to come to you for your final thoughts, sir.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to be on the panel. Awesome feedback from everyone. I want to educate a little bit more. And then I want to give final action points. I want to name one gentleman, and this is in response to Sheriff Lott, who's a very respectable gentleman with an amazing career, and I thank you for your service. There were white people who stood up against racism and called it out as early as for a long time, but one stands out in particular. His name is James Rebb, R-E-E-B. He was the Lutheran minister who died marching in Selma, Selma with Martin Luther King. And then he got shot by some white supremacists for being an N lover. And that's what we need more of. We need more white people who are willing to die for this. Black people, as I said, are dying every 2 hours, more than one expires. I also said that I was most offended by there not being the courage of anyone to stand up to do something to give George Floyd a second degree. Then Kathy elaborated on it. And what I mean is this, the police officer had 17 referrals for incidences. Let's be honest, 17. And he was leading those other trainees and teaching him how to be as bad as him. That's what a system means. That's to my children who are on the line and listening, to Micah and to my aunt and others. When you have 17 referrals at school, you get suspended. You don't become the leader of 5 more people to then do it again. And so that's the system that we must destroy. To the point of action, I have 100 young men and women who are in a pre-cadet cop program right now because their tagline is bad cops must go, good cops must grow, and you're looking at one of them. It was thanks to a $100,000 donation from David Stewart Jr. And cops are teaching these 16, 17, 18-year-olds how to be community enforcers, and they're getting paid internships. That's action. So I'll leave you with these last words. We do have to have the courage to sometimes lose control. And that's to the people who have control and power. I'm a person of power and I have to give it away. But what you have to do is more than just town halls like this. You have to have forums where you have meetings and committees that actually give the power to them to take some power that you had and give it to the people. Secondly, you have to have the courage to feel useless sometimes as a person of leadership and as a person on the streets, like my student or the student who said they may shoot me. I'm pretty cool, but they may not like me. Well, you have to keep on being there and feel like you're wasting your time because you're really never not. Have the courage to feel useless because you never are. Have the courage to listen, especially if you have power. Listen because you have a lot to learn. And the biggest room in our house is the room for improvement. So listen. Have the courage to receive help. Have the courage to have a broken heart. If you're a person who this didn't offend, if that daughter of Sheriff Lott came to her and said, why did this cop do that? And he said, you know what, it really doesn't faze me. You know, it really doesn't matter. That would have been one more kid who said, my daddy's a monster. I don't want to be like a monster. But he had a heart that was broken from this, and he told her the truth, and now they're soldiers for the right thing. Have that courage. Have the courage to feel. Aeneas said he didn't know what to feel. He was numb. Well, that's the I can't breathe syndrome, because there's bad in the world that makes you numb. Be okay with being vulnerable and shedding a tear like our young lady when she said, I'm kind of emotional right now. I'm kind of feeling some way. That's beautiful. Have the courage to feel, and most importantly, have the courage to love, because this is a heart condition. So we have to transform our hearts. Let's wake up, let's get up, let's stand up, let's speak up, let's show up, let's grow up, let's count up, let's power up, let's vote up, and let's lift up, let's lead up, let's go up, but never give up.
Thank you, Dr. McCoy. Thank you. My aunt, I want to get your final thoughts.
First, I wanted to say thank you so much for including me in this opportunity. It's been such a great time to listen to everyone and be able to use my voice on this platform. There is a lot of hope. People are moving, they're acting, and I know that I can't wait to be a part of that. I've already been registered to vote. Not old enough yet, but once I am, I know that I want to make educated decisions to make change. I want to reach out and be a part of my community and helping that community and just being a light and just continuing to hopefully enforce and impact other lives throughout this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. With that being said, let's go to Champ Bailey. Mr. Bailey, if you can leave us with your final thoughts.
She mentioned something earlier about hope, and And that's kind of where I am now. I have a lot of hope that things are gonna get better. You know, somebody asked me the other day if, you know, what is it really gonna take to affect change? How long it's gonna take? I said, basically this type of energy for about 20, 30 years. I mean, this is every day, every moment, this type of energy. Our white friends, our allies, everybody with this type of energy, and make it become infectious. We got to make this thing spread, because it can't be done by one. It's got to be done by everybody. And we got to find out the ways you can make change in your communities, you know, voting, you know, showing up, protesting, whatever it takes. Do your part. I think if everybody does just a little bit, things will start happening.
Thank you, sir. Sheriff Lott, I'd like to get your closing thoughts, sir.
After Ferguson, President Obama had a commission that came up with the 21st century policing, and it was a roadmap. It was a roadmap to building relationships with the community. Unfortunately, a lot of law enforcement agencies just took that book and just put it in the shelf and didn't read it and didn't use it. It needs to be used. We need to pull that back out, and we need to use it. And like Champ and young lady said, there's hope, and I have hope, but I also want to have action, and I want to be part of that action. I think you'll find that most good professional law enforcement officers want to be part of that hope and part of that change. So I'm encouraged by what I see, what I hear, what I've heard today. There's going to be more than just hope. I think there's going to be action this time, and I'm very encouraged about that.
Thank you, Sheriff Lott. Jalen, I'd like to come to you to get your final thought.
Like Champ said earlier, like I feel like if we all come together as one, and it's not gonna be as easy as people might think or as people might say, but I feel like all those questions that Champ said, like that are unanswered, like I feel like I said, if we come together, a lot of those questions will get limited, because like there's more questions to like situations like this than we can possibly imagine. So I just feel like if we can just do what we can together to like put a stop to stuff like this, I mean, those questions like could be answered with no problems.
Thank you so much, Jalen. And Mariah, I'd like to get your thoughts.
All right, so as everyone is saying, yeah, I think it starts with hope. That's all I'm praying for, honestly. I just hope everyone comes together. I hope everyone just realizes what's actually going on and just love one another. Like, that's a big thing, loving one another. Not technically like, you know, I love you so much, things like that. You just got to have love in your hearts. And another thing that I wanted to talk about was stereotypes. A lot of people, like, when they see a Black person, they just think, okay, that's a thug or robbing or drugs. And I feel like that's another thing that us as Black people also need to change, because, I mean, yeah, some people grow up that way, and, I mean, they have their own problems. But I feel like we have to change that. Like, we can't let everyone see us just as thugs and things.
Thank you, Mariah. Thank you. Aeneas, like to get your final thoughts.
Yes, once again, thanks for allowing me to be on the panel with all these great guys. Looking forward to working together with you. I think it was 1996, the Olympics, when the 4x1, the United States 4x1 men's and women's teams were predicted to win the gold medal. And if I'm not mistaken, each of them dropped the baton and were disqualified. And after I read that, I wanted to know, because I wasn't a big track guy, I wasn't fast like Champ, but I wanted to know who bared the greatest responsibility for a successful exchange. And doing my research, I found out that the person handing the baton off carries the greatest amount of responsibility for a successful exchange. And even though we have the passion of all of our young people, we talked about Generation Z, the millennials, they're out there. But it's really the current stewardship of us who are in leadership, for us to begin, whether, as the sheriff said, getting out that document that was instituted when President Obama was in place, and begin to take those things seriously. The final thing I'll say, as I think Kathy said earlier, let's stay united. we're the United States, even though it's been enacted out by flawed human beings. But as being the United States, one of the things that we have to remember is united we stand, divided we fall. Because justice, according to scripture, is a pillar that holds up society. We have to remember God gives the country or the nation and their leaders the ability to judge and execute righteous judgments before he has to allow an external outside country to come bring the change. So we're in a period, I really believe, guys, for us internally to get this together before an outside influence of another nation is thrust upon us to force us to know that we're all a part of the same nation. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Aeneas. Thank you very much. And McCoy, we want to come to you, last but not least, to wrap this up.
You know, as my final thought, I just want everyone to come together just like a huddle. Everyone in the circle, we can figure out what we need to do and then go out and execute what we need to do, just like a huddle, just like a play. And if that happens, it's gonna take a while, but we can definitely see some change.
Well, thanks, McCoy. And now we have the honor of being joined by the president of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, David Baker. Mr. Baker, first and foremost, what has the impact of both occurrences meant to you on a personal level?
I think personally, like most of America, I'm disappointed, I'm disheartened, I'm discouraged. You know, Scripture tells us that all things work together for good, and I believe somehow this can. But the violence is so difficult. You know, the guys who are in this bronze bus room are Hall of Famers, the very best that have ever played before. They are guys that understood the concept of team, that when they huddle up, they come from different places and they are different colors, and you know, some of them are Republicans, some of them are Democrats, some of them are Christians or Jews or Buddhists or agnostics. But when they get in that huddle, they're all one team. And when one member of the team is hurting, we're all hurting. And right now, our African American community is hurting a great deal. And I think we're learning that they've lived in fear for a long time. And at the same time, there's anger, and that impacts our law enforcement services. And there's a lot of dedicated law enforcement officers who are putting their lives on the line for the rest of us. And the question is, how can we come together? You know, one of our Hall of Famers for whom I have so much respect is the great Hall of Famer Tony Dungy. And he's been relying very much in a lot of his communications on a verse from Romans 12:21. It says, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil by doing good." And I'm hoping and praying that we can stop shouting at each other, stop the violence, but all of us start doing good. Whites for blacks, blacks for each other, each for Hispanics. You know, now's the time when we really need to be listening and doing great good in order to come so much evil that is out there in all of us.
And how has this impacted your professional career?
Certainly the social injustice here has impacted us greatly. Here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, we've got the Black College Football Hall of Fame. And that's not just black Hall of Famers. That is all the players that came out of the very best players out of historical black colleges, who, again, the reason there were historical black colleges is because they weren't allowed to play at white colleges. So we talk about that history here. I think that's an important history to tell their story. And whether it's Fritz Pollard or so many other players or that story, we hear it in our enshrinement speeches all the time, from Kenny Easley or LaDainian Tomlinson or Champ Bailey. These are guys who know that this is an important issue and they're using this platform to speak out. And that's why the Pro Football Hall of Fame is having this program today, to speak out against injustice, to have sometimes uncomfortable conversations, but conversations that bring us together and help us move forward.
Well, with that being said, Mr. Baker, what needs to happen going forward for actual constructive and meaningful change?
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to understand that we're all one team. What impacts one part of our team impacts the other part. And again, if we've got a member of our team like the African American community that's hurting, we got to find out why, and we've got to address it. Another member of our team is law enforcement. We got to help them understand why, and we've also got to help them do their job better. But I think from that comes listening. The huddle is an incredible place. You've got all those fans out there that are screaming and yelling that are the opponents, and there's so much noise. That's where we're at right now in our society. There's a cacophony of noise. And how can we listen to each other? How can we change our product? And how can we come together? And some of this is going to be laws that need to be changed. Some of this is policies and procedures and training that needs to be changed. Some of this is going to be attitudes that need to change in our cities, in our companies, in our countries, in our families. So how can we have those discussions? And we begin by listening to each other. So I think this concept of huddling up, like we have this program of Huddle Up America, is really about getting all of our team in the huddle, of respecting all of our team, of understanding that the least of us makes us stronger, and they're all important.
And lastly, Mr. Baker, what are your final thoughts and your final message to our audience?
I hope that everyone online will go to the link that you see here on the screen and to the Hall of Fame, ProFootballHallOfFame.com, Huddle Up America. And maybe that these are discussions that can happen around your table at home, on Sundays, or they can happen at your school, or they can happen in our companies. And we can make real change. The guys that are behind me here that are the greatest to ever play this game, they changed their world. It was at one point in time only white players. And then it not only became white players and black players and Hispanic players, Asian players, but it became players that were only one team. Didn't matter where you came from. What mattered was that we all had the same jersey on and we're on this team. And they become some of the greatest teams ever. And if we can do that, that'll make our community stronger, our company stronger. It'll make America stronger. So please go to that website. Please huddle up, listen up, and let's change America.
Thank you all for your interesting, open, and diverse views. As legendary Congressman and activist John Lewis said, we need someone who will stand up, and speak out for the people who need help, for people who are being discriminated against. And it doesn't matter whether they are black or white, Latino, Asian, or Native American, whether they are straight or gay, Muslim, Christian, or Jewish. This is part of our mission to promote the values of the game by bringing together a diverse group of opinions, backgrounds, and ages like we did today to listen and learn. We hope you walk away with a fresh look at today's issues. I know I did. For the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I'm Jameer Howerton. We look forward to the next time when we huddle up, America.